Gentlemen, please take your seats. The spotlight is about to begin. Good evening, everybody. I'm Mystery Matt, and you're listening to the Mystery Matt Spotlight Podcast. This evening, I'm joined by Sarah and Nancy, and we might have an audience member. Not telling. Anyways, we are covering, what are we covering?
Lizzy Bordon.
Lizzy Bordon. I don't know Lizzy Bordon. We did not go to high school together.
You wouldn't have?
No?
No, she was born in 1860.
Oh, are you close enough to the mic? Are you pointing at it? What?
Sorry, am I close enough?
She said something to me. Caitlin's here and she's bugging me.
This is a little intrusive.
In your face.
Just a little. It's inside my bubble.
Oh yeah, first you complain when it doesn't extend, and now you complain that it does.
It's inside my personal bubble.
Just remember, you got to counterweight it on the table, right? So make sure you got stuff there to offset the weight. That's why sometimes when I set up yours, I'll put the microphone on the other side just so that the weight is being reached across the table itself.
You did set this up, we didn't.
Wow. Either way.
There we go. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. So you know nothing about Lizzy Bordon?
Never heard of her.
How?
Yeah.
I just don't follow things.
I don't even remember where I came across it. I know I've seen the movie. There was a movie.
Yeah.
Oh, see, if it was like a couple years ago and it was like Lizzy Bordon, I probably thought it was like one of those up and coming Disney kids or something, like Lizzie McGuire or,
Not Lizzie
your
McGuire.
Hannah Montana's or something. That's probably what I saw it as and just paid no attention.
No.
So
there's an actual children's rhyme, and it goes, Lizzy Bordon took an axe and gave her mother 40 whacks. And when she saw what she had done, she gave her father 41.
Never heard that.
No.
Never heard that?
No, I've
Never heard that.
I've never heard that in all my time on this planet.
Fuck.
I know Fuzzy Wuzzy was a worm. Or no, Fuzzy Wuzzy
was a bear.
Fuzzy Wuzzy had no hair. Fuzzy Wuzzy wasn't really Fuzzy Wuzzy. And then there was Ooey Gooey was a worm. A mighty worm was he. He sat upon the railroad tracks. The train he did not see. Ooey Gooey. Slippery, slimy, green and yellow gopher guts, gooey little monkey feet. Or something. I don't know. Yeah.
I saw a little bunny and his nose is kind of funny. It's not.
When you're driving in a Chevy and you're feeling something heavy, diarrhea.
I remember that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Lizzy Bordon, it's one of the most famous in American criminal history. And it was New England's major crime of the Gilded Age. I don't know what the Gilded Age is, though.
That's probably the 1800s.
Okay. So this was very kind of it was grueling to read because it was written kind of how it'd be written then. And so I had to do a lot of translating.
Thesaurus checks. And
Yeah.
Old English, I mean?
Yeah,
he
Old
was
English,
just then strucketh by
well, no, because it's
cleaver
she
of
took
a
a
length
feint
of...
that lasted many minutes, and I'm like, she took a what? A feint, it was spelled F-E-I-N-T, not she F-A-I-N-T-E-D, fainted, but she took a feint and it's spelled differently, so I was like, what is that?
Oh, but it meant the same thing. She was knocked out.
Yeah, she fainted.
Oh,
down she went.
Down she went. She had becometh a faint.
I have fainted.
So class, nativism, and gender stereotypes all played a role in Bordon's acquittal for the 1892 killings of her father and mother. So it was actually her stepmother. Yeah.
So she was acquitted?
She was acquitted.
Oh.
What is that?
It means that she was let go. She was found not guilty.
Not only not guilty, but it's expunged from all records and stuff like that.
They can't try her for it.
That's surprising, mate, being that she was a woman in that time.
Well, that's what it was. Is if she was a man, it would have been looked at different because a woman couldn't do that kind of a crime. A woman was too dainty and couldn't lift up an axe, and
This woman was not dainty.
No, she was not.
She was built like a truck.
So I have questions. Because it said in...
Well, do we have the story?
Yeah, I have a story.
Yeah, okay.
But I do
'cause
have a
no idea
question,
what's
because,
going
like,
on.
after this whole thing and all my research, and it was like, she was 33. At that time, what 33-year-old girl or woman was living at home with her parents? Like, there must have been something wrong. Like,
Well,
she must have had a delay, or there must have been...
maybe she didn't get married off. Maybe she was homely.
Well, she wasn't, to me, when you look back at the pictures of her, she wasn't the most attractive woman. She was bigger. And I think she had more of a spinster look, but she was also highly abused by her father. So
Damaged goods.
He probably wouldn't have let her go. I do believe her sister got married and moved away. But yeah, anyways.
What time is this?
1800s.
1800. Okay, yeah.
So she was born July 19th of 1860 in Fall River, Massachusetts. Massachusetts. She died June 1st, 1927 in Fall River, Massachusetts. So the public largely believes that Bordon committed the murders. The rhyme is not quite correct. The female victim was Bordon's stepmother, and the weapon wasn't an axe, it was a hatchet, which is just a smaller version of an axe. Yeah. Same thing.
Essentially, yeah.
I actually had to ask my dad. I'm like, what's the difference between an axe and a hatchet? And
How
he's
long
like,
the handle
hatchet
is?
is smaller. He's like, the axe you use to split wood, and the hatchet would be to, like, split smaller pieces. And I was like, okay.
It's a hand axe.
Yeah. And the victims weren't struck half as many times. So, the murder. On a hot August day, on hot August 4th day in 1892, at 92 2nd Street in Fall River, Massachusetts. There's going to be a lot of... it's like 18 pages. Bridget Sullivan, the maid in the Bordon family residence, rested in her bed after having washed the outside windows. The city bell rang 11 o'clock. She heard Lizzy scream, "Maggie, come down, come quick, father's dead." Somebody came in and killed him. Andrew J. Bordon had been hacked beyond recognition. Police searched the downstairs for a sign of an intruder, but there was nothing. Nothing was missing. It was just somebody came in, killed him, left. Yeah. Abby D. Bordon was discovered by a neighbor who had come to comfort Lizzy. Abby was found on the second floor of the Bordon home. Now, the investigators found Abby's body was cold, where Andrew's body was found warm, telling investigators that Abby had been murdered first, before her husband approximately 90 minutes earlier. The headline that day was "A shocking crime, a venerable citizen and his aged wife hacked to pieces in their home." The Fall River Herald reported that news of the Bordon murders, it spread like wildfires, and hundreds made their way to 2nd Street, where Abby and Andrew Bordon had lived in happiness. Now, it says in happiness, but after going through all of this, I don't think it was very happy. He doesn't sound like a very nice man. Yeah, the Herald reported who visited the crime scene. Sorry, the Herald reporter who visited the crime scene described the face of the dead man was sickening. Over the left temple, a wound 6 by 4 inches wide, looking like it was made by the dull edge of an axe. The left eye had been dug out and a cut extended the length of the nose. His face was hacked to pieces, and the blood had covered his entire shirt.
So, in profiling, this would suggest, because of the face being so damaged, it would suggest that it was a very personal attack. So, yes, I just wanted to shove that in there.
So please jump in, because some of this doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, I'll jump in.
Despite the gore, the room was left in order. There was no signs of a fight. So obviously he wasn't threatened by the person that walked in.
I can add to that.
You're not allowed.
So, according to some reports, that he was actually napping on the settee or the couch that was in the living room, and that he was found on that. So it wouldn't have been a surprise. It would have been a blitz attack, but he wouldn't have been aware of it. Especially if the first few whacks were to the face, he would have gone unconscious right away.
I also have pictures if you want to add pictures when we post. Yeah.
No.
No. There's a picture of the stepmom and the dad. There's a picture. You can't really see the face. It's all because it's a black and white photocopy. So it's all you just see black on his face, but you can see him laying on the couch.
Yeah.
The initial suspect was a Portuguese laborer who had visited Andrew regarding wages owed. The conversation, though, had ended with Andrew saying that he would call him later. Medical evidence suggested that Abby was murdered by a tall man who struck her from behind. However, later debunked by a physician, saying that hacking is a sign of a deed from a woman. Which is interesting, because then during the trial they were like, well, she's a woman. She's a good Christian woman.
Okay, that's weird. I say it's weird because usually women do not do hacking and stabbing. Stabbing is usually like a replacement for sexual, whatever you call it.
Thrusting.
Kind of, yeah. Like, it's to represent intercourse from somebody who's impotent. Yeah. So hacking and
who's trying to kill you, Mr. Donut Man?
Women are actually more
not.
likely to kill via poisoning or gun.
Yeah.
Because they don't like the mess. So
a lot go poisoning.
Most do go poisoning, which is why I can't
anytime you
argue.
hear of a story of a woman, and it's usually, sadly enough, trying to get out of an abusive relationship.
They might use a gun in that point.
No, but like
If they're
even
desperate
still,
enough.
like you hear about like, you know, this guy ingested X amount of milligrams of cyanide a day and he still lived and all this kind of stuff. And
Why
it
do you have
wasn't.
access to cyanide? Because it's not
No,
easy
I'm
to get a
saying
hold of.
there's stories that have gone around of women slowly poisoning their husbands through like, you know, their morning coffee, or they put a little bit of something in their eggs,
Antifreeze,
or
ladies, antifreeze.
Dixie Chicks. Really, you went to the Dixie Chicks? Where are they now?
They're just the chicks now.
They're just they're not
Yeah.
Dixie anymore.
No. 2 days after the murder, papers began reporting evidence that 33-year-old Lizzy Bordon might have had something to do with the murders.
You think?
Well, it's funny that you say poisoning, because Eli Bentz, a clerk at S.R. Smith's drugstore
Oh, I met that guy.
in Fall River, did he have 2 eyes and nose?
No.
Or just 1 ear?
Yeah.
Yeah. And Fall River told police that Lizzy visited the store. The day prior to the murders and tried to purchase prussic acid,
Who wouldn't?
a deadly poison. A story in the
Probably
Boston
a deadly
Daily...
acid. Probably a deadly acid.
Yeah, it was a deadly poison.
You know, like,
But it comes out later on in the trial that she wanted it to clean a sealskin cape.
okay.
But they still wouldn't sell it to her.
Weird request.
Right? And, like, who wanders into, like, you know, that'd be like us wandering into Shoppers Drug Mart and being like, hey, can I get some, you know, like, poison?
Can I get about a pound and a half of uranium, please?
Yeah.
Looking for something that will. Well, I can recommend.
Now, will this take out a whole high school, or only part of it? Like,
How about a 250-pound grown man? Will this work for him? How much do I need for that? Right? Like,
Instead of hiring a hitman.
right. And, you know, like, it seems like they were very prominent family, from what I understand from my research.
They're prominent.
They're very prominent family, so they were well known. So, I mean, like, she
So-
doesn't sound very smart if she's wandering and looking for things she's not supposed to be looking for.
So I got some information on prussic acid. It's actually hydrogen cyanide. And HCN is what it's been called. It's used as a killing agent in whaling harpoons, although it proved quite dangerous to the crew deploying it and was quickly abandoned. From the middle of the 18th century, wait, that was the 1700s, it was used as a number of poisoning, murders, and suicides.
Cyanide, yes.
Yes. So it's capable of breaking down, the human body is capable of breaking down certain amounts of it, too. So, yeah. Cyanide.
A story in the Boston Daily Globe reported Lizzy and Abby, which is her stepmother, never got along peacefully. However, family reported the two got along. So there was a lot of controversial testimonies during the trial, where one side would say, oh yeah, they got along great. And the other side would be like, yeah, no, they didn't. Or she would make a comment, oh, I didn't get along with her, or something like that. So it was very, like, two-sided, and nothing really made sense. The Boston Herald viewed Lizzy as very suspicious. From the consensus of opinion, and this is quote, from the consensus of opinion, it can be said, Lizzy Bordon's life, there is not one unmaidenly nor single deliberately unkind to act. So a lot of this stuff I don't understand. Like, I'm not if anybody can, like...
from the conscious opinion, it can be said.
Consensus of opinion.
A consensus.
So basically, like...
So basically what they're saying is that she's never deliberately been unkind to anybody.
Okay, that's what
I believe.
Police came to the conclusion that the murders must have been committed by someone within the Bordon home, but were puzzled by the lack of blood anywhere except on the bodies, as well as their inability to uncover any murder weapon. Suspicions turned towards Lizzy, as her older sister wasn't in the home at the time. Investigators found it odd that Lizzy knew so little about Abby's whereabouts. After 9 a.m. According to Lizzy, her stepmother had gone upstairs to put shams on the pillow. And it comes out later on that she said that she didn't realize her stepmother was home. So at one point she's saying, oh yeah, she went upstairs to put shams on the pillow. And then the other in court, she turns around and says, her stepmother received a note that one of her friends was ill and she needed to go and see her. So that's why she thought her stepmother wasn't home. So, but yeah, it's so confusing. Investigators also found it suspicious that during Andrew's murder, she was apparently in the backyard looking for irons, which are lead sinkers for an upcoming fishing trip. The barn loft where she was apparently looking had no footprints on the dusty floor, and in the loft part where she was looking, it was apparently so hot that nobody could spend more than a couple minutes there.
Oh.
And they found it odd that she was going and looking for these lead sinkers a couple weeks before a fishing trip.
Well, sometimes it takes a while. They're really tiny.
They are.
So it might take a while.
True. On August 9th, an inquest into the Bordon murders was held in court before Magistrate Josiah Blaisdell, District Attorney Hosea Knowlton. They questioned Lizzy Bordon, Bridget Sullivan, which was the maid, household guest John Morse, and others. There was a 4-hour examination. Lizzy gave confused and contradictory answers. 2 days later, the inquest adjourned, and Lizzy was arrested by Police Chief Hilliard. The next day, Lizzy pled not guilty. She was transported by railcar to jail in Taunton, 8 miles north of Fall River. On August 22nd, Lizzy returned to Fall River courtroom for her preliminary hearing. At the end, Judge Josiah Blaisdell announced her probably guilty and ordered for her to face a grand jury. So from what I'm understanding is the police did an investigation, and then they held her, and then they did what it says, like a preliminary hearing. So basically she went before the judge, and then they decided she needed to go before a grand jury.
Okay, so what they do in that case is when they have evidence against a suspect, they can hold them for a certain amount of time, and then they can still gather and build their case. They did that with Richard Allen in Delphi. They had evidence to bring him in, but they still continued their investigation while he was in custody. And usually they are held in the county jail. In Richard Allen's case, he was actually transported to the prison for safety, and I'm using air quotations reasons. And the grand jury thing, actually, that normally happens now. I don't know back then. Normally happens before they bring people up on official charges. Like if you look at the Ramsey case, they actually did indict Patsy and John Ramsey, but they were never formally charged. And so a grand jury is more of a suggestive thing. It's private. You don't know what evidence, you don't know what witnesses have spoken, and usually the suspects are not there during the grand jury inquiry nowadays.
Well, I think they did it that way just because everybody was so confused.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Because nothing made sense. In November, the grand jury met. After refusing to issue an indictment, the jury reconvened and heard evidence from Alice Russell, a family friend who stayed with the Bordon sisters following the murders. Alice told the grand jurors that she witnessed Lizzy burning a blue dress in a kitchen fire. Now, at first I was like, kitchen fire, but then I thought this is like 1893? 1893. Yeah, 1893. So they would have like a fire in the kitchen for cooking. So she burned this blue dress. And then when she was questioned why she was burning the dress, Lizzy basically just said, oh, there was some old paint on the dress, so I'm burning it. But she also remembers, so Alice also remembered that Lizzy was wearing that dress on the day of the murders. So that looks awfully suspicious.
Sure does, doesn't it?
But how does Alice know that she happened to be wearing? Was she staying at the house during that time as well? Or, like, how would she know she was wearing that exact same blue dress? And a lot of the times people had multiple dresses of the same because they would buy a big thing of material and make a lot of dresses. So it might not have been the same dress. So that can be up to discovery during trial.
Yeah. Because all Alice said was that she was wearing a blue dress and it could have been any blue dress. But the evidence was not enough to convince the grand jurors to indict Lizzy for the murders of her parents. After Bridget's testimony, the Bordon sisters severed ties with Bridget. So June 5th, of course you would sever ties with somebody that was trying to, like, point at you and be like, you did it, you guilty.
Yeah.
June 5th, 1893, the trial of Lizzy Bordon begins in the New Bedford courthouse before a panel of 3 judges with a high-powered defense team. Andrew Jennings and George Robinson were defense, and prosecution was District Attorney Nolt and Thomas Moody. So defense would be supporting Lizzy,
yes,
and prosecution would be saying pushing that she did it.
They're there for the state, yes.
Okay,
yeah.
That makes sense now. Thomas Moody opened the case by carelessly throwing Lizzy's blue frock on the prosecution table, and in the frock revealed the skulls of Andrew and Abby Bordon. Talk about an entrance to, like, opening a case. And there's a picture.
Okay, like, what do you mean, like, frock? Like a blue towel kind of thing? Or,
dress.
like, oh, the dress, and with the skulls in them?
Yes.
Well, that right there is tainting evidence.
Right?
Cross-contamination of evidence. I guess they didn't really care about that thing.
It also is 1893.
It is also
Yeah,
1893, that's correct.
That's before Dick Tracy.
So, like, can you imagine being... I just, like, for a second had to stop, because I'm like, can you imagine sitting on the jury, and all of a sudden on this table, they, like, open a dress and 2 skulls roll out? Like...
Yeah. Like,
what the actual... bye. Can I leave now?
You get a lot worse than that in juries.
Oh, my goodness. This caused Lizzy to fall into a faint that lasted several minutes. So, the lady, she fainted. Moody's speech went on for 2 hours. Lizzy watched from behind a fan as the prosecutor described Lizzy as the only person having both motive and opportunity to commit double murders. From a bag, he pulled the head of the axe that he claimed Lizzy used to kill her parents. For the first several witnesses for the state testified concerning events in and around the Bordon home on the morning of August 4th, 1892. The most important witness, 26-year-old Bridget Sullivan, which was the maid, testified that Lizzy was the only person she saw in the home at the time of the... I'm really sorry.
That's okay. It is tough, isn't it?
At the time the Bordons were murdered, but did not witness it. She also testified that everything was pleasant between Lizzy and her stepmother. However, other witnesses disputed this. Hannah H. Gifford, who made a garment for Lizzy a few months before the murders, stated Lizzy called her stepmother a mean, good-for-nothing thing. I don't have much to do with her. I stay in my room most of the time. Bridget testified that Andrew and Abby Bordon experienced stomach pains on the day before the murders and told jurors that at the presumed time of Abby's murder, Lizzy claimed she was washing outside windows. Bridget also stated she opened the door for Andrew after he returned from his walk. She then stated she heard Lizzy's cries a few moments after 11. Several witnesses described seeing Andrew at various points in town in the 2 hours before he returned home. Household guest John Morse, age 60, described having breakfast in the Bordon home on the morning of the murders and then leaving to do chores. Dr. Seabury Bowen, the Bordon family physician, sat on the witness stand. He was called to the Bordon residence late morning on August 4th, recounted Lizzy's story about looking for lead sinkers and that she said her father was having stomach troubles. Sorry, that he was having stomach troubles, but he was also having troubles with his tenants and might have something to do with the murder. So apparently he owned, from what I understood from my reading, is that Andrew Bordon owned other residences and people rented from him.
I believe so.
Do you know what he did for business?
Sounds like a landlord.
I think he was mostly a landlord, but I think he also had something to do with a factory, because now there's some reports that his ghost walks around a factory that's a couple miles away, 2 or 3 miles away from the home. The house is actually, I think, a bed and breakfast now.
Yes, you can go stay there.
Yeah, I don't think I would want to. I think the girls from the WWE, I don't know if I sent you any of those links from YouTube, they actually did a thing at their house, like a ghost hunting thing.
Oh, neat.
Yeah, I'll have to find it and send it to you.
Okay, I got a question for locations and staying there. You know the hotel that The Shining was filmed at?
Yeah.
Would you?
Yes.
Would you?
Yes.
Yeah? Because it's supposed to be stupid
There's
haunted.
one room in particular that they did do on actual ghost hunters, and it was crazy. I can't remember what the hell is the fucking hotel name. I know what the hotel name is. It's just not coming to me.
No, she needs help. Yeah, she says she's stuck already.
Is that what the note was?
No, the note was to tell me that I'm dying.
Oh. His game.
I didn't shut my game off.
You're editing all this, right?
Nope.
Okay.
On cross-examination, Seabury agreed with the defense that the morphine he prescribed Lizzy might account for some of the confused and contradictory testimony she gave at the inquest.
One question. So was the physician a state's witness, or was it a defense witness, or does it not say?
He was a state's witness,
Okay.
but he was because it said he was cross-examined
Okay, right.
by the defense, so
Okay,
then he was
sorry,
a
my
state
bad.
witness. Yeah.
My bad.
Adelaide Churchill, Bordon's neighbor, was another important witness. She remembered Lizzy wearing the light blue dress with diamond figure on it, but did not recall seeing blood spots on it. John Fleet, the assistant marshal of Fall River, recalled his interview with Lizzy shortly after the murders. He testified that when he called Abby, her mother, Lizzy stated, quote, "She was not my mother, sir. She was my stepmother. My mother died when I was a child."
Ooh,
Yes.
Stick it to him.
Most compelling testimony came from Alice Russell. Described a visit with Lizzy the night before the murders in which she announced she would soon be going on vacation and felt that something is hanging over me. I cannot tell what it is. Lizzy also told her, "I feel afraid something is going to happen." She wanted to go to sleep with one eye open half of the time for fear somebody might burn down the house or hurt her father because he was so discourteous to people. So it sounds like there was
Discourteous.
discourteous, sorry. Thank you.
AKA he was an asshole.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
he was not a nice fella.
It also sounds like she has some mental health.
It sounds like she's got Stockholm syndrome.
True.
It
Yeah.
could be.
It could be.
There is a possibility
Defending
of
your
mental
captor.
health.
Yeah.
But from some stories I've heard about it, her and her sister were abused by their father and even by the stepmother. And I don't know if there was any sexual abuse, but there was also something to do with the uncle. I don't know if you bring that up or not, so I don't want to bring too much about the uncle. So the uncle was also suspected of possibly committing these murders, allegedly. Don't come for me. Oh, he can't.
He's been dead for 100 years.
So it is, in my opinion, that the uncle may have actually been the one who was responsible, because apparently he was also on the property at this time.
Allegedly.
From what I understand.
Yes.
From my understanding.
From my understanding. Russell was asked about the dress burning incident. She recounted Lizzy stating, "I am going to burn this old thing up. It's covered with paint." The trial, the newspaper stated, was like a pigeon shooting match, as well as there has never been a trial with so many surprises, with such marvelous contradictions from testimonies. And that's basically what it was like one side would say something and then the other side would say the opposite. And it was like they just canceled each other out.
It's funny because it's not even one side versus the other. It's one testimony from one person who says one thing, and then upon cross-examination basically contradicts their own statements.
Yes.
So no wonder there was the outcome that is happening. I don't want to go too far.
The decisive moment in the trial might have come when the 3-judge panel ruled that Lizzy Bordon's inquest testimony, which was full of contradictions and implausible claims, could not be submitted into evidence by the prosecution. The judges concluded that Lizzy, at the time of the coroner's inquest, was for all practical purposes a prisoner charged with 2 murders, and that her testimony at the inquest, made in the absence of her attorney, was not voluntary.
Yeah.
Lizzy should have been warned, the judges stated, that she had the right to remain silent. That option was never given either.
Nowadays, that whole case would have been completely thrown out.
Yeah.
Because you have to read your Miranda rights.
The judges rejected the state's argument that Lizzy was only a suspect, not a prisoner, that her statement should be omitted because it was in the nature of a denial rather than a confession. The prosecution rested its case on June 14th after one final defeat. The state wanted to have a druggist, Eli Bentz, from the drugstore, recount for the jury his story the day Lizzy visited Fall River Drugstore, the day before the murders, asking for prussic acid. The judges concluded, though, that the evidence should be excluded. The defense presented only a handful of witnesses, all casting doubt on police assertions that Lizzy's alibi was suspect. Emma Bordon, the older sister, was the defense's most anticipated witness. Stated Lizzy and her dad had a good relationship. She stated the relationship between Lizzy and her stepmother had a cordial... The relationship between Lizzy and her stepmother was cordial. 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 It was a cordial relationship. Which is, I always thought that was a little bit interesting, because, I mean, like, it's your sibling, would you not? I would lie on the stand for a sibling. I'd go to bat for honestly, if you're gonna have money, and, like, it's obviously a prominent family, so you know there's money. Both parents are dead. If they're coming out of it on top, would you not lie through your teeth for a sibling?
Okay, so let's put it this way. 1, if your parents are both abusive dickheads and one of your siblings killed them, maybe. But on the other hand, if there was a substantial amount of money at play, I would want my sibling incarcerated so I could reap the benefits.
But
Cha-ching, sorry, Adam.
What if it was, hey, I don't have the stomach to do this. Can you go and kill our parents? I will have your back on the stand, and then we will both go and live happily ever after.
I don't know. You could ask the Menendez brothers that question, right? Because they ended up both killing their abusive parents, and now they're both in jail or prison. I think so. I might. I don't think Adam would have the stomach to kill my parents.
Yeah, but he might be the one making the deal with you to go do it for him.
Yeah, he would. He would be the one to make the deal.
Over Sunday dinner. So,
you want to kill Mom tonight, or?
But there's no reason why I wouldn't throw him under the bus if there's a substantial amount of money at play. I would throw him under the bus. I'm not that connected.
All you hear is boom, boom.
Yeah, thunk. Sorry, Adam. Guess what? You'll like prison.
Go ahead, drop the soap.
That was so bad. I'm sorry.
Summing up for the defense, A.V. Jennings argued, there is not one particle of direct evidence in this case from beginning to end against Lizzy. There is not a spot of blood, there is not a weapon, and that they have connected with her in any way, shape, or fashion. Governor Robinson followed with, the state had failed to meet its burden of proving guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, and that it was physically impossible, this part is particular, it was physically impossible for Lizzy, without the help of a Confederate, to have committed the crime within the timeline suggested by the prosecution. Because
without
she's a woman.
Confederate?
A man.
Oh.
Basically.
Yep. Justice Dewey told, I'm sorry, but like, I think I would change my name if my last name was Dewey and I was a judge.
Right?
Justice Dewey told jurors they should take into account Lizzy's exceptional Christian character, which entitled her to every inference in her favor.
And I told you not to bug me when I'm cleaning my room.
Yeah. That's the Dewey that popped in my head too.
Ditto.
It's actually Doofy.
Is it,
Just to get that out there.
is it Doofy?
It is Doofy. Yeah, it's Officer
Doofy, yes.
Doofy. Yeah, but it sounds so close that everybody just links the two together anyways because Doofy's hilarious.
The jury deliberated for an hour and a half before returning with its verdict, not guilty. Lizzy cries with joy. Aftermath. Papers praised the jury verdict. New York Times editorialist stated, Vanity of ignorant and untrained men, charged with the detection of crime, the usual inept and stupid and muddle-headed sort that such towns manage to get for themselves. Basically, making fun of the whole trial, calling them idiots. It was speculated that had Lizzy been male, the verdict may have been different.
Probably.
Yeah.
They would have been more pushing towards a conviction, I think.
Yeah. After the trial, Lizzy and Emma purchased an impressive home on the hill in Fall River, and they called it Maplecroft. Emma moved out in 1905, and Lizzy died in 1927 and was buried by her parents' graves in Fall River, Oak Grove Cemetery. So the website that I was looking on, and I will send it to you, there was a little document that said 14 reasons why, or 14 reasons to believe it was Lizzy.
Do you know the name of the site just so that we can...
Yeah, I have it saved on my phone.
Well, I meant just for like the podcast itself
Wait,
so we could, shout out and let the people who are listening maybe take a peek instead of having to look it up.
Let's see here.
It's like IStabMyMom.com or something.
It's called famoustrials.com.
There you go. Thank you.
And it's just Lizzy Bordon.
You can also find us on YouTube where we play video games and stuff.
Yep.
Yeah. If we're going to push one, we might as well push the other.
So before you go into this, I just want to comment on the whole male thing. So if they have the same amount of circumstantial evidence that they had on Lizzy, it could still create reasonable doubt. It would be harder to prove that they did it based on evidence. But you got to remember, evidence collection back then is not like it is today. Mm-hmm. That evidence there, if they don't have a weapon, they don't have blood evidence, they don't have any forensic evidence, they can't commit. There's nothing.
They got nothing. Yeah.
Back then, that should have been sufficient amount of evidence. If they could proven that that dress was covered in blood and not paint. So if it was a man who's like, say, his overalls from being out in the barn lifting hay bales or whatever the fuck they did back in those days, had blood on it, they would be able to prove it. It would it could be said that it could be blood and they could probably convict. But I think if they presented that case the way they presented it here with that kind of evidence, I think even a man might have been acquitted.
You think so?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, because it was all very circumstantial. So 14 reasons to believe it was Lizzy. Number 1, if not Lizzy, then who? Only Lizzy had good opportunity to commit the murders. I believe it was there was the maid and Lizzy, and
John Morse.
He was gone at the time of the murders. He had breakfast and then left, but the maid was laying down in her room. The stepmother was upstairs. The father was on the main floor. And so it just puts Lizzy as, quote unquote, in the loft.
So one thing I heard, because you said maid, and it's kind of struck a thing. One thing I heard was that there was a rumor going around that the maid killed the stepmother because the stepmother was a bully towards her, as many I think would be towards her help. I'm using air quotations. And that maybe she killed her, and then when the father came home, killed the father so that he wouldn't discover the body, or that, yeah, something like that.
But then we're back to a woman being prosecuted again.
But who's this? A woman could lift a hatchet.
Oh, I'm not saying that.
And they would have the power. And I think you said some of the wounds were not very deep. That would also prove that there was no power behind it as much as if it was a...
Or that they were holding back.
Or they're just really shitty.
Mm-hmm.
My first time with an axe.
Number 2, it looks like... Yeah, it looks like an inside job. The police found no signs of forced entry. Nothing appeared to be stolen.
Well, except for the axe. Forced entry into the face. Holy crap.
But there was no forced entry into the home.
But who locked the doors back then? Probably nobody.
Well, that's exactly it. But they're saying that in the timeline that there's not enough time because he was still warm when police got there. So there's not enough time in the timeline for somebody to come in, kill them, and then leave, and nobody see them coming or going.
Also, if there was no time for them to ditch the weapon, there was also no time for her to change her clothes and hide it as well. So, because I don't care who you are, as soon as you hit somebody in the head with a hatchet,
It's going to spray.
you're going to have blood spatter, and that blood spatter is going to come back at you. And as you lift the hatchet again, it's going to go all over your arm, it's going to go up your shoulder, into your hair, all over your face. It's going to be, no pun intended, a bloody mess. And there's going to be no way, if she's got time, to wash her face, her hair, and her clothes. So she would have, you got to think about that. There's no time. If he's still warm, it happened relatively fast. So that's where I kind of stand on the fact that maybe she didn't do it.
Well, yeah, because nobody was covered in blood.
Mm-hmm.
So unless she ran and cleaned herself up, but then where's the rag where she cleaned herself?
Yeah.
And in 1890, it wasn't easy to just run to the bathroom, quickly wash your face.
No.
Number 3, although Lizzy claimed to have been downstairs at the very time her mother was violently murdered upstairs, she said she heard no alarming noises. This despite her stepmother being struck multiple times with an axe and falling on the floor.
Did the axe have the silencer on it?
Okay, but even when you stab somebody with a knife, it's very noisy. It's not as noisy as a gun or a baseball bat. There's still a noise, and it's almost like
But there would be screaming, there would be a kerfuffle, there would be
a struggle, and there was probably defensive wounds. Like, I haven't seen the autopsy report.
Okay, well, unless the first shot's from behind.
But doesn't
They
necessarily
don't see it coming, hits the brain, instant dead.
It wasn't the back of the head.
Yeah. So it was the face. Even then, if she had fallen, you would have heard a thunk. Especially in shitty houses back in those days where there wasn't a lot of soundproofing. There was no such thing as soundproofing. It's like our house. You can hear us do it between the walls. That's why we don't when River's home. Too many questions.
Moving on, number 4. August 3rd, Lizzy attempting to purchase prussic acid, stating she needed it to clean sealskin cape. It's just a little bit suspicious. Night before the murders, Lizzy visited a neighbor, Alice, stating an unidentified enemy of her father's might soon try to kill him. Number 6. Lizzy told the police she was alone in the house with her stepmother on the morning of the murder. Excuse me. Lizzy stated her stepmother received a note summoning her to visit a sick friend. Although no note was found, and the whole house was apparently torn apart looking for this note. Number 7. When Bridget came back inside from washing the windows, she reported hearing a muffled laugh coming from upstairs. She assumed that it was Lizzy making the noise. Lizzy denied being upstairs at the time of the murder. You would hear more than a giggle.
Oh, you would hear a hell of a lot more
Yeah.
than a giggle.
We were talking old farmhouses, though, so some of these are pretty expansive, too.
But they weren't as soundproof as what you're thinking. You would hear the noise.
Well, I live in an old farmhouse. It was built in 1902. And if I'm upstairs, I can't hear what's happening in the back part of the house. I'm in the front part of the house. But if I'm downstairs, directly underneath the floor, you can hear people walking upstairs. That sounds like a flippin' elephant is upstairs.
Yeah.
Although that could just be my children. But there are, it's kind of weird because if my dad has company in the back of the house, I can't hear it upstairs in the front of the house. I also can't hear the TV through the floor.
Yeah, same thing with my grandfather's house. It's pretty old, too.
Yeah.
And the only time we could hear the TV downstairs was through the hole in the floor where the old chimney used to go.
Yeah.
And that was it.
That's where, yeah.
So they're not...
They're built, there's not insulation.
There's a lot of lumber.
Yes, then that, yeah. And so that would muffle.
Hear it. If you're downstairs, you're going to hear it.
Yeah, so if somebody were to...
when somebody else is getting murdered, you're going to hear it.
You would hear, if the mother fell, you would hear the thunk, is what I'm saying. At the time of Andrew's murder, Lizzy claimed to be in the barn looking for her lead sinkers. Police found the loft stifling hot and it was difficult to believe anybody would voluntarily remain there for more than 20 minutes. And there was no footprints found either, and it was quite dusty. And they're saying that they would have seen footprints.
Yeah, she wasn't actually there, yeah.
Exactly. And with it being stiflingly hot, I imagine there was no airflow.
I assume that they were used to that back then, though.
True.
That's gotta be John. We're a bit pampered nowadays with air conditioning. So back then, it would be something that they would get used to. You know, like you would see people, and I say people, in fields in like the South picking cotton.
Yeah.
That would be hotter, but they would do it, and because they were used to that heat. You see people now coming from countries that are way hotter than ours wear coats when it's 30 degrees here, because to them that's cold. To us, we're sitting there in tank tops and short shorts. You know, so
shorts.
It basically comes down to wherever you are living, you get acclimatized to it on a certain level. So even if it was like really stifling hot and there was no airflow, she might have been accustomed to it.
But wouldn't the police also be accustomed to it?
Yes, but if they're not used to that barn, and she is,
That's
she
true.
would be accustomed to it. The only thing that I can't dispute is the lack of footprints in the dust, as well as dress would be dragging through it.
Yes.
Ouch. Causing even more disturbance to the dust.
Yes.
Unless she was out and around the barn at that time and not necessarily in it.
So when it comes to things that have a rhyme behind them like this one did, one I wouldn't mind doing maybe even closer to Halloween is The Legend of Solomon Grundy. Have you heard that rhyme?
I don't know.
If it's just a Superman character, then no.
It became a Superman character, but I believe it started as the rhyme. And it's something like he was born on a Monday and he was killed on a Sunday or something like that. I'd have to look it up.
Yeah,
I'd have to look it up. But yeah, it's a cool rhyme too.
Number 9, Lizzy had a strained relationship with her stepmother. During investigations, the police continued to refer to the stepmother as her mother, and she continued to refer to Abby as her stepmother. So she continued to correct them, and the way that she was correcting them, and I mean, for a woman to correct a man back then, took that.
Yeah, that could get you beat.
They took that as very
Disrespectful.
assertive, is what was said. Although Lizzy appeared to have a somewhat better relationship with her distant and forbidding father, she resented that her father had transferred a Falls River property to her sister Emma instead of her. The week before the murders, following an apparent argument, Lizzy and Emma had left Fall River by coach for New Bedford. When they returned, Lizzy chose to stay in a rooming house for 4 days rather than her own room in the family's residence. That must have been some fight.
Sounds like.
In 1881, not 1881.
Yeah, Sarah would have remembered it otherwise.
I was like, this doesn't seem right.
No,
I just
not
wrote
really.
it wrong.
I just thought you were talking like some cash and jewelry showed up at like one of those pawn shops and
Well,
it was traced back to them.
Cash and jewelry had been stolen from the master bedroom, and it was suspected to be Lizzy. She also had a past of shoplifting, which is far from being, murders, but they were trying, it just basically, she's not the perfect daughter. After the discovery of her parents' bodies, Lizzy continued to send various persons to run errands, leaving her alone in the house. Would she not be afraid if there was a suspected murderer in the house? So if nobody saw anybody leave, would you be, as a female, would you be sending all of the people out on errands and be at home left with your parents' dead bodies?
Be super cool and super chill with being by yourself.
Exactly.
And...
In a house that just 2 murders just happened.
Like even as a guy, I wouldn't want to be sitting there alone.
No.
I wouldn't even stay there.
No.
Like we're talking about the time like before the phone.
Yeah.
It's just 2 cans in
Call the police. All right, I'll be back in a day and a half.
Yeah, pretty much.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. The last, number 14. So August 7th, 3 days after the murders, Alice observed Lizzy burning a blue dress in a kitchen fire, and Lizzy stated it was the dress that Lizzy had stated had paint on it, which I find very interesting. If this family owned multiple homes, or multiple properties, why would you stay in the home where your parents had been murdered?
Why a kitchen fire? Don't they live on a farm? Can't you do that shit outside?
So from me reading this, it doesn't sound like, it sounds like Lizzy may be a little slow. Like there was like a delay in the way that she like explains things, or she just played dumb.
Or it could have been the lead paint of the time.
That's true.
Mercury in the water and such.
So they did talk about the autopsy. No, I wrote some of it down. The other part I'm going to read from the website. So the autopsies were performed by W.A. Dolan, medical examiner, assisted by Dr. F.W. Draper and John W. Leary of Fall River. Clerk D.E. Cohn of Fall River. The time of the autopsy was 11:15 a.m., August 11th, 1892, 1 week after the deaths.
You're not going to get much out of that.
No. So, Andrew Bordon was first. He was well-nourished, 70 years old, 5'11". It said no stiffness of death on account of decomp, which was advanced. Obviously would be advanced in a hot
summer.
Yeah. I'm going to actually read this from the website just to make sure that I have it correct.
Okay, so why would they wait a week to do an autopsy? That I don't get.
Do you have left?
This is just it.
Oh, okay.
The autopsy.
Well, I can't figure out why they would wait a week to do an autopsy. Like, especially when you've got decomp, you're already losing valuable evidence.
Super Bowl was on.
You're not in August. I don't think they had football back in those days. They also are not only losing valuable evidence, it's going to make it harder to determine exactly how many number of whacks there was because things are going to be sloughing off. I'm sorry, it's disgusting. It's true. Your skin changes, it bloats, it slops off, it becomes slushy, especially in accelerated heat.
Yes.
Oh, and don't forget the bug activity.
Yeah. So it said the body of a man well nourished, age 70 years, 5 feet 11 inches in height. No stiffness of death on account of decomposition, which was far advanced. What is that?
What word?
Well,
Inguinal hernia?
inguinal?
Inguinal?
Inguinal hernia on right side. Abdomen had already been opened. Artificial teeth in upper jaw. There was no marks of violence on the body, but on left side of head and face. There were numerous incised wounds and one contused wound penetrating into the brain. The wounds beginning at the nose and to the left were as follows. 1. Incised wound, 4 inches long, beginning at lower border of left nasal bone and reaching to lower edge of lower jaw, cutting through nose, upper lip, lower lip, and slightly into bone of upper and lower jaw. That's one hell of a hit. 2. Began an internal angle of eye, extended to 1 3/8 inches of lower edge of jaw, beginning 4.5 inches in length, cutting through the tissues and into the bone. Began at lower border of lower eyelid, cutting through the tissues and into the cheekbone, 2 inches long and 1 3/8 inches deep. 4. Began 2 inches above upper eyelid, a half inch external to wound number 3, thence downward and outward through middle of left eyebrow through the cutting the eyeball completely in half, and excising a piece of the skull 1.5 inches in length by a half inch in width. Length of would be 4.5 inches. Number 5, being on level of same wound, superficial scalp wound, downward and outward 2 inches long. 6, parallel with a 1/4 inch long, downward and outward. So these are all the, like, how many? So there was 10 cuts on his face. 10 wounds on his face, yeah. Number 7 was a half an inch below number 5, 3 inches in length, downward and outward, penetrating cavity of skull. On top of skull was a transverse fracture, 4.5 inches in length. 8 began directly above number 7 and 1 inch in length, downward and outward.
Does any of them say anything about depth?
No, I don't think so.
Except for muscle and skull.
Yeah, it does say like into the bone.
Usually they measure the depth.
Directly, or number 9, directly posterior to number 8, beginning at ear and extending 4 inches long, 2 inches in width, crushing bone and carrying bone into the brain, also crushing from without in. Number 10, directly behind this and above it and running downwards, backward 2 inches long superficial. The general direction of these wounds is parallel to each other. The head, right half of top of the skull was removed. Brain found to be completely decomposed and in fluid condition.
That could be just from decomp,
Yep.
not necessarily from the crime itself.
Chest and abdomen opened by 1 incision extending from neck to pubis. Right lung glued to ribs in front. Left lung normal. Heart normal. Abdomen, spleen normal. Kidney normal. Liver and bladder normal. Stomach and portion of the liver had been removed. Lower part of large bowel filled with solid form feces. Feces also in lower part of small bowel. And so
he
there's...
was ready to poop.
Yeah. So record of autopsy on body of Abby D. Bordon, age
Did
64.
it say what the actual COD was?
I think they're assuming like blunt force trauma.
Well, I would have to say blunt force trauma
Axe.
because there didn't seem to be a lot of like bleeding out, like a
Yeah.
sanguination.
But like part of
it would have
his
been
skull
straight
in
up severance of this
in
and
his
that
brain.
and damage,
Yeah.
and you're just done.
You're looking at sharp force trauma mixed
Yeah.
with blunt force trauma, with blunt force probably being
The axe is one of the most brutal weapons there is because of its weight distribution.
Yeah.
now.
You know, a sword is spread out over the entire blade, where an axe is it's weighted to the front,
Yeah.
right?
And
You're
the
coming
momentum.
across.
So you're gonna you're gonna have more blunt force than sharp force trauma. So the one thing that when I was doing the stuff on Diane Fossey, I was talking to a firefighter who was, I guess, seen his fair share of crime scenes. Said that because I was talking to him about the blood issue with using a machete across her face, and he said there's not as much blood as you think when you go across the face because you're getting more blood internally than you are externally. So the blood's going to fill up in the cavity. It's not going, because there's not, when you look at your face and your skin, right? You think the head would bleed a lot. And yes, the head would bleed a lot. But if you're going from the face, and it sounds like most of these wounds to Andrew was to the face, you're not going to have as much blood spatter as one would think. So she might have been able to hide it on her dress or by covering it with an apron. I don't know. Remember they used to have like the bib aprons back then? Maybe she took that off or she changed it. I don't know. So she could have hid that. She could have hid that amount of blood if what I've heard about facial wounds and stuff is true.
So the record of autopsy on body of Abby D. Bordon, age 64, was on Thursday, August 11th, 1892 at 12:35 p.m., 1 week after the death. So this was an hour 10 minutes after the first. The autopsy was performed by the same people. The body of the female was very well nourished and very fleshy, 64 years of age, 5'3" in height, so you're short and fat, no stiffness of death, owing to decomp, which was far advanced. Abdomen,
I bet she smelled great.
Yeah, abdomen had already been opened, artificial teeth and upper jaw, no marks of violence on front of body. On back of body was first an incised wound, 2.5 inches in length and 2.5 inches in depth. The lower angle of the wound was over the spine and 4 inches below the junction of the neck and body.
So that one you didn't hear the screaming because that was an instant severance of the head.
Yep. And extending...
a lot of blood for that one.
Yeah.
Yes.
And extending thence upward and outward to the left. On the forehead and bridge of the nose, there were 3 contused wounds.
Outwards to the left?
Yep.
Yeah, so right-handed.
Those on the forehead being oval, lengthwise, with body. Second, the contusion on the bridge of the nose was
Upwards
1
and
inch in
outwards to
length
the left.
by an inch in width.
No, the other way.
What, like,
Upwards and outwards to the left. You were going to the right.
oh,
That's
this way.
yeah.
Oh, okay, so it would have been left-handed.
Yeah.
Oh.
And see, none of that was brought up in the case of how things were done and would have been right-handed, left-handed.
See, like you try to do upward and outwards with a right hand.
No, you can't do that.
That's weird.
Yeah, that's why I was
you're
trying to,
coming
like-
this way.
I was going upwards like this, upwards to the left, but you said out.
But
outwards.
what about a defensive position? Stay back. Leave me alone.
You're still using your left.
Coming across. You're using this for a defense. So this is the offense. You're using less offense than you are defense. So you're in a protect yourself position.
Okay, but you are right-handed, right?
Yes.
So you would probably put your left hand out for
No.
a defense.
No, you put
You put your dominant hand out.
See, I wouldn't. But
If
then
I'm
again,
trying to grab a sword away from you while I have one in my left hand, I can block your
so
sword
you're
with my
saying
left hand.
Lizzy put her
and
right
grab
hand
your
out, right?
Right hand in defense,
And then-
left hand slashing.
But you're still not going to have the same amount of
Leave me
effect.
alone. Leave me alone. And then you come up like that.
But does that not? Yeah, but try striking somebody else like that. You're doing it across you, right?
You're going out and to the left. So
Out
like,
and up, right? Up and out to the left. So like this.
yeah, up and out to the left.
So it said the lower angle of the wound was over the spine, 4 inches below the junction of the neck and body, and extending thence upward and outward to the left. So you'd have to use your left hand.
From behind.
But you
From
wouldn't need
behind.
your defensive hand out.
Unless you're holding them.
But then she would have felt it and she could have fought back.
Or over the
Yeah.
mouth.
No, because
Then you're
just go to the front.
then you're too
So
close.
this is saying,
You're too close for an axe swing.
Yeah.
so this was across the throat then, the neck with body.
Oh, so it's in the front?
Because then it said on the forehead, on the forehead and bridge of the nose were 3 contused wounds, those on the forehead being oval length from the lengthwise with the body. Second, the contusion on the bridge of the nose was 1 inch in length by 1/2 inch in width. The third on the forehead was 1 inch above the left eyebrow. So it must have been the throat, not like the neck.
Like the front.
Yeah, the
So she
front.
basically
This is not a very
decapitated.
big axe, I don't think.
Well, a hatchet is a smaller axe.
I know, but like even still, like it's probably smaller than my spoon I took camping.
Okay, so here's the thing. She killed, obviously the mother, or stepmother, excuse me, was killed first. We know that by the fact that her body was cold by at least 2 hours before Andrew's death. So the hatchet, the blade on the hatchet is going to be sharper at this time because it's already, her depth of her wounds across her neck basically severed her head from her neck, from the sounds of it, or close
From
to
the
it.
spinal cord, yeah.
So that would have to be pretty fucking deep because your spinal
No,
cord's
because they're
back
coming
here.
from the back. The first one I think is from the back because it originally says the first one is from the back.
Either way, she was nearly decapitated. We
She
can
was-
agree on.
She was decapitated from her spinal cord, but maybe not from her body.
Right. So the thyroid bone and stuff was still probably, or the hyroid bone was probably still attacked. So okay, either way, she was nearly decapitated. She was decapitated from the spinal cord, instant death. So blood spatter after that would be very minimal because your blood stops flowing. But as soon as that hit, that would have been blood. It's probably spurting. That would have been a lot of blood coming from your neck. But the axe would have been a lot sharper, which is why the wounds on her father was many and more basically what's superficial.
Blunt
Which is why blunt force trauma would have been for her or for him, and exsanguination of blood would have been for her.
Yeah, she would have had more cutting and less blunt force, whereas he got less cutting and more blunt force.
Yeah. Says third on the forehead was 1 inch above the left eyebrow, 1 1/4 inches long by 3/8 inches in width. The other one, 1/4 inches above the eyebrow and 1 1/2 inches long with 1/4 inch wide. On the head, there were 18 distinct wounds, incising and crushing, and all but 4 were on the right side. Counting from left to right with the face downward, the wounds were as follow. There are 18. So that's a lot for the face.
I still think.
But they're also, so they're like 2 1/4 inches long. It was 1 3/4 inches long, 2 1/2 inches long. So it wasn't, she had she had already died and the person was just letting loose pretty much from what it sounds like. But imagine 18 wounds just on your face.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
These wounds on the right side
That's a
were,
hate crime.
yeah, they were parallel to,
Crime of
parallel,
passion,
the
sorry.
direction being mostly from in front backwards. That makes sense to you?
Mhm.
Because it doesn't make sense to me.
What was it again? Sorry.
These wounds on the right side were parallel, the direction being mostly from in front backwards.
Yeah.
So they
does
were all
that mean?
going through the front, going backwards.
From the front to the back.
Oh, okay.
All in parallel means they're all going the same direction.
Okay. There was a hole in right side of skull, 4.5 to 5 1/4 inches,
And you can put your weed in there.
through which the brain evacuated and fluid condition being entirely decomposed.
Yum.
But everything was normal
On the inside.
on the inside.
Okay, so I just looked up some information here on.
we want to get moving. We're at an hour and 5 minutes.
Okay, well, I won't take long. So I was looking at whether or not Lizzy was right-handed or left-handed. She was right-handed, but there is evidence that says the killer was left-handed.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
So my up and out thing with the left hand
Was
does
correct.
have some weight.
Yes, it does. But that doesn't necessarily mean that she didn't do it, because like you said, if you put your right hand out for dominance, but it sounds, we have agreed that that wound that severed her spinal cord came from behind, so she wouldn't have needed to use her right hand for defense. That would have put her too close. You would have needed to be able to get that momentum to come behind. So you're left-handed, you're going to sneak up, do that upward wound with your left. The killer was left-handed.
Incoming nerdy fun fact.
Mm-hmm.
Link from The Legend of Zelda was left-handed until they made it possible to play The Legend of Zelda on the Nintendo Wii. Because most people being right-handed, they switched Link to be right-handed to suit most players. So he used to be left-handed.
So yeah. Anyway, so it looks like Lizzy was right-handed, and allegedly the killer who did it was left-handed, a southpaw. I think this podcast turned out really good in terms of the fact that we managed to generate quite a bit of conversation.
I think very
well done, Nancy,
Nancy.
for your first true crime. I think you did great.
I like the oldie crimes.
Because it makes you think further. You're not using
Well,
today's technology to find evidence. You got to really think about it.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
us sitting here everybody could see us. We were making hand gestures, trying to figure out left and right and all that stuff. So that was an interesting autopsy report.
Anyway, yeah.
So I did use, sorry, I just
go
wanted to
ahead.
specify. I did use the famoustrials.com,
Uh-huh.
but I also used Smithsonian Magazine.
Oh, that's
Oh, there you go.
I use that sometimes too.
Yeah.
That's a
So
pretty
I will
good-
send you the links because there are pictures.
That's reputable.
Yes. There was a lot of stuff, but I was trying to find something that would be not just Wikipedia, and I was trying to find something that would give me a good idea of it. But yeah, these true crime things are a lot. This is 18 pages.
You didn't have to go that far. Like I,
just
said,
kept
we're
on writing, and
we're
I was
over an
like-
hour here.
I
We also had conversation.
yes.
Nancy's gonna need a new book.
Nancy is going to need a new book soon.
I might have a book for you. So,
Well, some of it is work.
anyways, you guys have yourself a great night. Good job, Nancy, and we'll see you next week.
Happy Mother's Day to all the
And
moms
happy
out there.
Mother's Day. This will be out after the fact, but if you're a
It's
mother,
Mother's
happy
Day
Mother's
today.
Day. If you're a father that is doing his own thing, happy Mother's Day to you too. All right, we'll see you next week. Bye bye.